desired results. Sam, in the Army, we used to call them scroungers. Scroungers are people that find ways of making things happen that normally there's no other way to do it. So Sam is our scrounger when it comes to finding ways to help others with vision problems. So let's keep Sam in our thoughts and prayers, please. And finally, from Lion Rosie Babin. Lion Rosie, I was happy to send her 25-year Chevron award this week and had a chance to visit her by phone. It was appropriate because yesterday was Veterans Day, and her son Alan is a veteran that has given as much, who has sacrificed as much for our country as anyone. So
You can,
so she sends her regards.
sure, you can take the electric car if you want.
Okay, let me, and my last, this is a show and tell. See if y'all recognize what is happening here.
Oh,
Well,
He has to protect himself from me.
yeah, this is my surprise gift from my wonderful wife, Gloria. And
That's
so, you know, this reminds me that
Lions now.
of all the symbols that are that easily recognizable in the world, this symbol of the Lions logo is probably one of the easiest recognizable. So when I walk into HEB or wherever, I'll be representing our Lions Club and easily seen by with that mask. So with that, let me move on to birthdays. And birthdays this coming week, we have on November the 15th, Greg Thompson. So happy birthday to Greg. Also on November 15th, Judy Saul. So happy birthday to Judy. And then on November 16th, our tail twister, Scott Hendricks, is celebrating a birthday. So to our three birthday folks this week, we send our birthday greetings to you. Now we're moving on in the agenda to
Rudy.
Yes, hello.
My birthday is the 18th.
I'm
This is
sorry.
Beverly.
Bev,
My
oh,
birthday
Bev.
is the 18th.
Bev, I have you down for the, yes, I do have you down for the 18th, and I will recognize your birthday not only today, but we'll recognize it again next week. So
Oh, it's
double
Wednesday.
dipper.
yeah,
It's
just make
Wednesday.
yeah, and you, all this is free to just for you, Bev, and we don't even count your birthday twice, even though we're recognizing twice. Okay, so thank you for that. We're not forgetting our wonderful lion, Bev. So moving on the agenda, I'm going to call on Linda Locke to kind of be ready. Is Linda on?
I'm here.
Okay, Linda, we're getting ready to do casino night choices. And because let me kind of give a little background on this. Casino night is one of our main fundraisers. We just started that this past year. It was very successful and we want to continue that, but it does involve a lot of social gathering. And because of that, the casino night committee is looking at summer and maybe more like September for our fundraiser. But in doing their planning, they want to get our participation, our Lions Club participation today on selecting a couple of items on how to plan forward. So let me let me ask Linda. Linda, could you tell us what we're going to be doing today with casino night?
Okay, so the date we've projected at this point is September 24. Please put that on your calendar and start talking to all your friends. A lot of preparation has to go into this, everyone, as you probably know. So, but to move forward, there were a couple of items that we'd like for you all to give us a little preference vote on. And that the first thing is the theme that we might go with, so we can begin planning. Two themes have been suggested. One is called, an MASK, Mask Parade. It would be sort of a New Orleans style theme, just kind of playing on what we've been through all year with our mask wearing. And so we would probably wear masks of different sorts and types, and it would just be that sort of theme. So what A is Mask Parade theme. B is country western theme. It's fall, it's September, and lots of fun fall events and times could be celebrated. So the country western theme would of course have, just different kinds of decor. So what I'd like to do first is get a vote, a hand raising vote. If somebody can help me watch.
Actually, Linda, we're going to do a poll so people can just go on right now and make their choices right now.
Okay.
This is a feature of Zoom.
Thank you, I appreciate that, Mark. And so you just press on one or the other, is that correct?
That's correct. People can go ahead and start voting right now. Now you might want to go and start talking about the second choice too.
Okay, the second choice is, we talked about, particularly, I guess, for country western night, if we chose that, a small dance floor. It would cost about $200, and so it's fairly insignificant in terms of that. We will have 2 rooms this year. So the second room would be more for socializing and maybe a small dance floor. There will be a bar in there and some appetizers, and particularly for dessert and coffee afterwards, so people can gather. So the second vote is, would you like a dance floor, or would you not like a dance floor, or perhaps you don't have a preference for that? But it would be in the second, which is somewhat smaller. It's not a tiny room, but it's a smaller room than the big room we had the casino night in last year. So that's the second question, just those 2 things, a dance floor or no, and what would you prefer the theme to be?
Okay, so thank you, Linda. And thank you, Mark. This is the new way of providing input. I have voted and I clicked the submit. So those of you that are in your lounge chair or easy comfort chair, you'll need to move up to the screen and help us with these choices. And
all right, we're going to give you about another 15 seconds or so. So we've got a little more than half of people have voted. Well, quite a bit more than half. So hopefully there won't be a recount and we can get this done. So a few more seconds. All right, I think everybody
Fraud,
who's gonna
fraud.
vote
I call
has
fraud.
voted fraud. All right, well, here's the results. Let's see, share results. Here we go. So that's the current results. Looks like Country Western comes out just a smidgen ahead, so it's pretty close. And it looks like to me that it's in favor of a dance floor. Well, I know there's several no preferences, so take that for however you want to calculate. Anyway, Linda, there's your numbers there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's thoughts and preferences. We can move forward with a little bit more planning this way. Thank you so much.
okay, thank you.
And otherwise, Mac has to count every vote by each one.
All right, so thank you. So that was our first, we need to kind of give something else I have here. You're gonna, here, let me, here.
What is that?
It's my little sound machine. I found it in the toy box for our grandkids. And there are other sounds here that you're not interested in, but anyway, that's the applause meter. And so thank you. That applause goes out to Linda and the casino Night Committee, as well as to Mark for his providing a new way of providing input and so quickly. So thank you for your
Right.
knowledge and for your help, Mark.
Sure.
All right. Now we're going to move on into trying to bring a little bit more positive closure to the Rose Day sales that we had recently. Want to thank everyone again for participating in the Rose Day sales, either by selling roses, with packaging roses, delivering roses, and all the other ways, especially to our auctioneer that we saw each week, auctioneer JP Kirksey. So there were so many folks that were involved with the Rose Day sale, and thank you to all. We appreciate that. But today we're going to recognize those that were involved in the sales. So what you see up on the screen right now is a chart that you've seen before. There's been a little bit change in the total dozen, but you can see the list of folks that were involved in the sales. And today we want to take a moment to recognize them. And we have a certificate of appreciation that I will send to them, but we're going to show it on the screen today just to further acknowledge how much we appreciate their participation. But everyone's, I want everyone to feel appreciated because we do appreciate what you have done. All right, I think we're ready to begin.
Rudy,
Yes.
I have a funny story. We sent roses to a very dear friend of ours who happens to be 97 years old. And whichever lady was delivering them to her said, "This is from the man's." And she's 97. She's going, "Man? What man?"
What a great story. Yeah. Well, thank you, whoever not only delivered that, but sent those roses to that particular person. That's a great story, and I'm sure that was a nice. That was probably the highlight for that day for that person. But on the chart, if I might ask, I think we're ready to begin. Robert, are you on also?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we want to do is just call the names of those folks and show their certificate of appreciation on the screen. And we'll do this fairly quickly as Mark is able to bring it up on the screen. But thank you to everyone. So we're ready to begin. And Robert, if you'll begin, please.
Yes, Sam Ruiz.
Oh,
Did you hear it?
Yes, our first certificate goes to Sam Reese, and then to Glenda.
Robert Seidel.
I'd like to thank the members of the Academy for this award.
Wild applause, wild applause. Okay, and certificate for Molly Tower.
That's you.
Herb, Canada.
Okay, to Herb
Herb
Canada.
Canada.
Ellen Grimmett.
Mark
And who is this
Hastings.
guy? Mark Hastings. All right, Mark Hastings.
Can I leave that up for a while?
Kent Crone.
Jane Edmond.
And to Chuck Mandelbaum. Let me read this one also on Sandy, to Sandy and to David Mann.
Linda Locke.
Cecilia Burke.
And who is this guy? Here's another one,
Watson.
Robert Watson. All right.
That's you.
Bill Martin.
Patty Robinson.
Yeah, Patty Robinson, and then
Greg
Greg
Thompson.
Thompson.
And Glenda Summers.
All right.
And Beverly Weeks.
Whoa, another winner. And to Peggy Bruner.
Whoa, Peggy. Ma'am.
And Mim Ruby. And here's another guy, our auctioneer,
Kirksey.
JP Kirksey.
Jim Overton.
I'd like to say a story there. Those roses went to my wives, daughters, and granddaughters.
Yeah.
How many wives do you have?
Hey, Roberto, that didn't come out just right.
Actually, there's 10 dozen. I forgot my wife.
Well, thank you,
I hope-
Roberto Martinez.
I hope that was singular, wife.
John Niefler.
And to John Niefler.
Rudy Munguia.
Rudy McGee.
Another one that looks a little strange.
Mac.
To Mac Ragsdale
Ann Ward.
and
Oh,
our
boy,
wonderful
Ann.
former
28 dozen.
immediate past president, Ann Ward.
Jim Robertson.
49.
Wow.
Yeah, Jim did
Wow.
real well.
We're getting up there. 62.
Whoa.
Alan, yeah, and Alan Ford. Thank you, Alan.
And here's Top Dog.
Yeah, our top
Michael
seller,
Wow.
our top seller was Michael Cowan. So that completes everyone. Again, let me emphasize that this is on the sales part of it. We did not have a way of preparing a certificate of appreciation to everyone, but again, we recognize your help in all of this, and so thank you to everyone. And I think we just about got a certificate, and I will be the certificate to these individuals through the email, and you should be receiving it later today. But thank you to everyone for your participation. Okay. And let me just say that the total roses that we sold, our goal was 200. And we are, I believe our final count was 386 dozen roses. So
Great.
that is a wonderful story about just making the effort and getting those roses sold. I'll have to get back with you on the net that we made on that. But again, the total number of roses was more than our goal. And so we're very pleased with that. Okay. So we've had quite a bit of things happening already in our meeting, but our main part is here getting ready to happen. And I'm going to ask Lion Norman Tyring to introduce our speaker and the program. So Norman, it's yours.
Okay, hi everybody. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to meet with you today. And I just wanted to say we have a wonderful guest with us, guest speaker today that was basically referred to me from a lecture Laura and I listened to last year at the Ole at the UT. The director of the Bracken Cave Preserve gave a wonderful presentation last year at the Ole at the UT Lifetime Learning lectures to give an explanation of what was happening at the Bracken Cave and the ecology and things related to that. As a consequence, I've got the good fortune of introducing you to today's speaker, Dr. Amanda Adams. Amanda has been working with bats for 17 years and has traveled to every continent except Antarctica to work with bats.
Wow.
She now teaches at Texas A&M, hooray, hooray, and the Conservation Research Program Manager for Bat Conservation International. Her research focuses on bat echolocation, behavior, ecology, and conservation. Bats are one of the most diverse groups of mammals on the planet. Part of what makes them so fascinating is their diversity, but also how important they are to ecosystems all over the world. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Amanda Adams to teach us more about what makes those amazing animals the rock stars of the night. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you so much. It is really an honor to be here with you guys. I'm thrilled and really nice to be part of the meeting. So thank you for having me. I am a bat expert. Yes, my parents think that's weird also, but I absolutely love it. I love my job, and I can talk about bats all day long. So I have quite a bit to cover, and I might not even get through everything. But I'm happy to take questions if you want to throw them in the chat as you think of them while I'm going. I can try and work in my answers as I go, or we can answer questions at the end. But yeah, my goal is to have you fall in love with bats just as much as I do. So we're gonna dive right in. If I can get my slides working there. So I am a lecturer at Texas A&M, so I'm sorry if I'm going to start off with a graph. I know it's not very nice, but this is a pie chart of all of the mammal orders of the world, showing the relative diversity of each order, so each group. So this biggest piece of the pie, this blue piece, are the rodents, and so that's like rats and mice and squirrels and all those guys. This next biggest piece of the pie, about a quarter of all mammal species, is are bats. It's the order Chiroptera. So this is the second most diverse group of mammals in the world. It is the only group of flying mammals, and there's about 1,400 species that we know of today.
Wow.
And so every day we're actually adding more species to that list. I think last time I checked, we were at 1,412, but it just keeps going up. So it's pretty amazing. The order Chiroptera, it's an odd word, but it comes from the Greek where chir means hand and ptera means wing. So essentially their wings have the same bones as we have in our hands. So the digits that you can see here in the skeleton are the same as we have in our hands. So I like to think of it as that they're like flying with jazz hands. They're moving through the air. So as Norman mentioned, the reason that I'm in love with bats is because they are so diverse. There's all those species spread all over the world on every continent except for Antarctica, and they're doing amazingly different things. And so I'm going to just try and highlight some of the diversity in bats around the world today, and then also dive into some things specific to North American bats. But our biggest bat in the world is this beauty here, the giant golden-crowned flying fox. He is a fruit eater that lives in Malaysia and has up to a 6-foot wingspan. So he's huge, but really his wingspan is very wide, but his body is still not that big. And he only eats fruit. This group of bats, they're called flying foxes because someone thought their little puppy dog faces look like foxes. And this group doesn't echolocate, so they're using vision to find fruit on trees. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have our largest bat, smallest bat, the bumblebee bat. And this is an endangered species in Thailand. And it is also the smallest mammal in the world. So it was, if you can see on the picture, the size of the tip of an adult thumb. It weighs less than a penny. So they are tiny, tiny. One of the ways that we think about bats, as I already started talking about, is by their diets, because they eat so many different things. And by their diets, it also tells us a lot about how they interact with the environment and kind of the ecosystem services that they provide. So the first bats that I always think about are our insectivores. All of our bats in the United States, except for a couple of migrant species that come up from Mexico, are insectivorous bats. So they are hugely important because they are the #1 predator of nocturnal insects. They've been estimated to provide, on a conservative estimate, $3.2 billion in pest control services to the US farmers. And so they're eating large quantities of agricultural pests, such as the corn earworm moth. They eat pecan pests and all sorts of different pests. So, you can see this guy here chowing down on a moth. But then we also have bats like this that are really specialized, where they can go and even get insects that aren't flying around in the air, but that are actually on surfaces. And so they have such specialized hearing, they can actually hear the footstep of an insect on the ground. So it's just incredible what they're capable of doing. Our frugivores are our fruit eaters. We don't have any in the United States or Canada, but they are found pretty much everywhere else, especially in the tropics. And they are some of the cutest bats, #1. And then they're also really important because they are eating plants and then distributing their seeds as it passes through them, much farther distances than the plants would be able to disperse themselves. There's even plants that are so reliant on bats that the seeds aren't able to germinate unless they pass through the gut of a bat. So a lot of the species that bats are feeding on in like Central America and South America are going to be actually some of the most important species for regenerating the rainforests, because those plants that they're feeding on are pioneer species that can grow and start establishing a new forest after it's been cleared. So really key for that. And then we have our nectivores, who are the hummingbirds of the night. They are delicate, small, beautiful little bats that have these long snouts and even longer tongues so they can get in there and get that nectar. But they are key pollinators of many species. There's a lot of plants that we wouldn't have if it weren't for bats pollinating them. One big agricultural kind of money maker around the world is durian, and that's a bat pollinated plant. But more near and dear to my heart is this plant here, the tequila agave, that is solely pollinated by bats. And so they are going to be flying and following these bloom corridors of the tequila agaves and pollinating them and keeping those wild populations healthy. And so because of that, one of the projects that BCI has is we are actually helping to restore these agave corridors and doing agave planting projects in Mexico and the Southwest US to help the bats, but also make sure that we have healthy tequila crops. And there's even starting to be a label that some tequila producers are able to get. It's making bat-friendly tequila. It's still fairly hard to come by, but I'm happy to talk more about that later. It's pretty cool. one of the neatest groups of bats are carnivores. So these are the top of the food chain, just like any other carnivore out there in nature. And what's neat about these carnivorous bats is some of them are very specialized, like the two that I'm highlighting on this slide. So this guy here is my very favorite bat. I only recently decided that, but it was the first bat that I ever caught. It's called the fringe-lipped bat. It's down in Central America and South America, and it has all these little warty projections on its lips. And so it makes it look a little weird, but what's neat is those are sensors so that it can detect if a frog is poisonous before it takes a bite out of it. And so they are very specialized on eating frogs. And then this other guy over here is the greater bulldog bat, and he specializes on fish and has these huge feet that is, they actually kind of pull through the top of the water, almost like a trawl to catch little fish. And then, so they specialize on eating fish. And then also in other environments, there are other carnivorous bats that feed on reptiles and rodents. And all of these carnivores are pretty rare to come by because they are the top of the food chain. So there's much fewer of them, just like any other carnivore, like a jaguar or something. All right, now the most famous bats out there are sangivores. So sangivores solely eat blood. So yes, these are our vampire bats. They are a very interesting species, and it still is even hard for me to fathom that they're able to get enough nutrition from only feeding on blood. It's pretty remarkable. So they are really have a lot of specializations for this diet. They will fly and then land on the ground, and that's why I have a picture of this bat on the ground. Most bats don't like being on the ground, right? Because they fly. So they will land on the ground and then sneak up very quietly and crawl on to the animal that they're going to feed from. So a sleeping cow, I don't know, sheep, goat. Here is even a picture of a little vampire bat lapping at some blood on, I think, a goat. So one of the things that people don't understand about vampire bats is that they do not suck blood, contrary to what all the movies say. They actually lap it up like a kitten. Isn't that cute? But they only take about a tablespoon of blood a night, so they're not draining animals or killing animals with their feeding. But they're interesting species. At the end, if we have time, I'll show you this video. So because they're good at moving on the ground, they can actually run, unlike most bats that can barely move on the ground at all, and they can get up to 2.5 miles per hour. So this is a video of a vampire bat that was put on like a little mini bat treadmill. It's pretty neat. Another specialty about vampire bats is that they have these sensory organs in their nose that's the same as what pit vipers have, so that they can sense the temperature and be able to locate an appropriate place to make their little cut to feed from the blood. So, and they have these really sharp, specialized front teeth for making that very small, sharp cut. And it's almost like a paper cut. They're so sharp that they can make a very small, precise cut. And then, so that it doesn't clot over immediately, they will start looking at it, and their saliva has special anticoagulant properties in it to keep it bleeding rather than scabbing over. And then there's a lot of research into their saliva and those properties that are actually being integrated into stroke treatment and everything, because it helps move things across the blood-brain barrier. So it's pretty interesting. And one of the other key things is that vampire bats, while pretty much everyone around the world knows what a vampire bat is, they don't realize that they are only found in Central and South America. So they are not in the United States, but they are down in Mexico. They are not anywhere else in the world. So they have a really relatively small range in the world. All right, so now I'm going to go through some bat myths. At the end of this, I will get into some questions that you guys have about bats and diseases. But I'm going to go start with some of the most common myths that I've had. Normally, if I had more time, I would have you throwing out all the myths that you've heard. So I'm pretty sure you've heard all these before. So the first one that I encounter less now because kids are getting smarter about everything is that all bats are vampires, right? Bats can turn into Dracula or Dracula can turn into a vampire, that all bats want to suck your blood. No, obviously, I just was telling you that that is one diet of many. But what's actually pretty cool is that of those 1,400 bat species in the world, there are only 3 that are vampire bats. So these are our 3 vampire bats in the world that only live in South and Central America. This is our most common one, that it was creatively named the common vampire bat. And then these other 2, the hairy-legged vampire and the white-winged vampire, side note, we're not very good at naming bats. These guys specialize on bird blood. So this common vampire bat is the only one that feeds off of mammals. So these guys are going to be specializing on like cows and things that are laying out in an open field, but they can feed on human blood if the opportunity presents itself. But these other 2 cuties are never going to feed on mammals. They specifically feed on birds, which is pretty interesting. All right, so this is the one that I really gets me going. If you want to hear a bat lecture, just tell me. Bats are just mice with wings. Ugh, I hate it. So I hope you realize that they are not, right? I was in that first chart. Rodents and Chiroptera are 2 completely separate orders of mammals. And actually, bats are more closely related to primates and humans than they actually are to rodents in over history. So pretty interesting. But the reason that this matters to me is that rodents and bats have very, very different kind of life histories. You know, a rodent lives maybe 3 years. If it's a really, really lucky rodent, it lives like 5 years, where the oldest known bat lived to be 43 years old. So that is a huge difference. So if someone is thinking of a bat as just a mice with wings and a pest in their house that they need to kill, I mean, an animal that can live 20 to 40 years easily, that's a big deal, taking a life like that versus a rodent that will live only 3 years. And same thing with their reproduction. A rodent has many, many, many babies in those 3 years that they are alive, while a bat has typically only 1 pup, that's a baby bat, a year. So some species have twins, and there's at least 1 species that I know of that will have up to 4 pups a year all at once. But the majority of bats only have 1 pup a year. So they live a very long time and they reproduce very slowly. So it's really important that people don't view them as pests that need to be exterminated if they get into their buildings. Another one that I'm sure we have all heard, blind as a bat. Bats are blind, and this is definitely not the case. Bats actually have just as good a vision as we do. The really interesting thing is that they don't have night vision. So for a nocturnal animal that doesn't have night vision, you can imagine why someone would think they are blind. But rather than developing good night vision, that's why they have echolocation, which is arguably better than any night vision out there for the kind of details that they're able to get from it. And in the range, there are fruit bats like this flying fox here that has large eyes, that doesn't use echolocation, and they can see really well. And then there's little insectivorous bats like this guy, who does have tiny, tiny, tiny eyes, but even though they are tiny, they can still see. So this is one I've heard a lot, and I have no idea where it comes from. bats will get in your hair. So I don't know where it comes from. My theory is that where I've heard it the most is up in the Northeast, where everyone goes like swimming in lakes and stuff in the summer. And I imagine that people are in like the lake in the evening swimming, and then there's this swarm of insects around their head that's following the person around, and maybe bats are going for that swarm of insects. But that's all I can think of, because bats obviously do not want to get in your hair. They really want nothing to do with humans. So that's the one that I have really no really good answer for. All right, another one that this is probably one of the most common misconceptions about bats is that all bats have rabies. So any wild mammal can have rabies. And really, number one is never handle a wild animal, right? You have no idea what kind of diseases they have. I think one of the issues is that if someone finds a bat on the ground, one, they're usually surprised, and it's probably the first bat that they've ever seen. And they're so tiny that they don't even think twice about going and picking them up with their bare hands, which is, don't do that. Even if they don't have rabies, don't touch wild animals with your bare hands. And then the chance that a bat that is found on the ground, there's a higher chance that something's wrong with it, right? Bats don't belong on the ground. So if you find one on the ground, it's either injured or sick or something's wrong with it, because otherwise it wouldn't be there. So the percentage of bats that you might find on the ground could increase the chance that they have rabies. But in general, all bats do not have rabies. I've handled thousands upon thousands of bats and only encountered some bats in Australia that had a cousin to rabies, lyssavirus, and then 2 bats when I was doing bat rehab work, because people found a sick bat and gave it to us. But when I'm out just catching bats, they don't have rabies. Each region has its different primary vectors for rabies. Bats that have rabies have been found in every state except for Hawaii. But in all these regions, these are the primary vectors. So the East Coast, raccoons. In Texas, fox is a much more likely suspect for transmitting rabies than bats, and so on. So really, bats and rabies is not something to worry about. It's just don't go around petting wild animals. I guess on the more current fear of diseases, we've all heard on the news that bats caused COVID-19, right? And the problem with this is that a simple inaccurate statement like this then causes people to go out and start killing bats for no reason. So this picture is of a certain group of bats called, they're rhinolophids. They're horseshoe bats because they have these funny horseshoe-shaped nose structures that help them with their echolocation. And that was potentially the bat that was in the Wuhan market that could have potentially had SARS-CoV-2. Our bats in the United States, there is no evidence that they have any coronaviruses. So really, there is a chance that a bat played a role in this, but there's also a good chance that the bat initially had the coronavirus, and then there was an intermediate host of a pangolin. I really just like to use this moment to, if you have never seen a picture of a pangolin, they're amazing. This endangered animal that's just beautiful, a scaly anteater. So it's more likely that a pangolin actually transmitted it to a human in those awful conditions in that animal market. But
Amanda,
really what it comes, yeah.
Yeah, Amanda, excuse me. I noticed that you're on, if this is the sequence correct, you're on slide 20 of 51.
Oh,
So,
no, I'm not going through all of them.
oh, I just wanted to see, but I do have a question. Could you relate this information to the bats that we have under the Congress Street Bridge? And
Yes.
yeah, how all this applies to the Austin area?
Yep, you got it. Yeah. So essentially, bats can host coronaviruses, but none of our bats in the United States do. It really just comes down to respect wildlife and leave them in their natural habitats. Uh, so with our bats in Texas, first, I'm going to talk about Bracken Cave, and this relates also to the bats in the Austin, the Congress Street Bridge. So the state mammal of Texas is the Mexican free-tailed bat, Tiderida brasiliensis, and these guys are just amazing species. They are able to fly up to 10,000 feet in the air to go forage on insects. They are eating tons of insects every night, like tons as in the weight of insects every night. So at Bracken, this is the largest colony of mammals in the entire world. So the Congress Street Bridge population is about 1.5 million bats, which is a lot. Bracken Cave's population is about 20 million bats. So it is orders of magnitude larger, but they're all the same species. And both of these colonies, both in Austin and in Bracken Cave, which is about 20 miles north of San Antonio, are maternity colonies. So both of these, it's going to be mothers that move in first and then give birth to their pups and raise them all summer in these special locations with the other mothers. And then eventually by the end of the summer, the babies from that year are also flying. And then everyone will migrate south for the winter. And some will stay behind, but the majority will migrate south for the winter. So that's why they are increased into these large numbers over the summer, because they're coming back to give birth at these colonies. So here's just an aerial look at Bracken Cave. BCI owns 1,458 acres right here outlined on this. And this is where the actual cave is, I think marked right there. And it's actually, this entrance that we now see is in a sinkhole. So originally that wasn't the opening, but a sinkhole happened thousands of years ago and created what is now the entrance. And this is all part of a larger preserve that's also owned by the Nature Conservancy. And they have about 3,000 acres that they're protecting around this cave, because it is, like I said, the largest colony of mammals in the world. So it's not just special to Texas, but really it is a international kind of wonder. I think it should be on the list. So this is just a look at what that cave looks like. We've been working on these really neat LiDAR scans. So the bats will fly out every night. It can take 4 hours for those 20 million bats to leave. And the reason they're all in this cave is because they're very picky about temperatures. And so they just find that this is the perfect spot. And yeah, with that number of bats, though, we're not most of the time able to go in here because it is so full of bats. There's very high ammonia levels, and these are piles of built up guano from over the hundreds of years that they've been there. So pretty amazing. So this is what it can look like inside there. And it's same thing under the bridge. It's just they are packed as tight together as possible. So they like it hot. Imagine how hot it is in Texas at the peak of the summer. And then they are willingly crowding together in numbers like this. And so they like it hot. It's pretty amazing. And then once the babies are born, they are packed in there even more tightly. And we can call them pinkies because they don't quite have their fur yet. And so they just have that pink skin. And one of the really amazing things is that the mothers will leave them at the maternity colony, go out for the night and forage, and then come back and be able to find their baby amongst 10 million babies. It's amazing. And we still don't entirely know how they're capable of doing it. The colony from Bracken and other surrounding caves in Texas are so big that they actually show up on Doppler radar scans. So this is from a weather scan. And so each night it looks like a weather front that comes out at 7:30 p.m. and then disperses and is gone. And so it took them a little while to realize that that was not a storm front, a very, very short-lived storm front, that those are the bats coming out to forage every night. I am not sure if the Congress Street Bridge shows up on Doppler in the same way, but I would imagine it probably would. It'd be fun to look for. Another thing when you are out watching millions and millions of bats leaving a roost is that also attracts predators. So at Bracken Cave, there's a lot of snakes that will feed on the bats. But at both the Congress Avenue Bridge and at Bracken, there's a lot of hawks and whatnot that will be there, and they know when those bats are going to come out and when it's going to be dinner time. So, you could say that they are just, part of the food chain, and that's life.
Amanda, excuse me again.
Yep.
We are running a little short on time. We could be here all afternoon and it would be just so fascinating. But there is a question about when is the best time, I think this is from Sid, when is the best time to view the bats, especially here in Austin?
Yeah, great. So this is actually my last slide. So for viewing the bats, like I said, they're a summer maternity colony. So depending on the year and the weather, they're going to return probably starting in as soon as April. But it's really better to kind of wait till later in the summer. The really peak time to see the most bats is after the pups, the juveniles of that year, start flying. So in August is when you get the most bats leaving. And then it's also kind of they will leave before dusk on some nights, and then other nights they'll leave after it's dark. So it can be hit or miss. I would say I've been in July and they left after dark, but then, yeah. So anytime during the summer is essentially the answer. And then time of night wise, it will depend on the weather, but typically they're going to leave. You just plan on around sunrise, and it could be, 15 minutes before sunrise or 15 minutes after sunrise, but it's typically right around that time period. Then I also see some questions about disease. So I do not know. Oh, sorry, Terry. Sunset. So you want to go around sunset to go see the bats. They are also. It can be really interesting to get up in sunrise and watch them returning, but they all return it's more dispersed time frame that they return to the roost. But when they leave, they all pretty much leave at the same time. So it's a more spectacular time when they're leaving at sunset than when they're returning at sunrise. And I do not know how many people are bitten in the US by bats a year. I know the number of rabies cases from bats a year. I think it's usually like 2 or fewer, like 2 in a bad year, are getting cases of rabies. But it's really not a big deal anymore because people like me can get a rabies vaccine. So I don't really need to worry about getting rabies. And then the post-exposure shots are very effective now. So it's anytime there is a chance that you were exposed to a bat in a room, maybe while you were sleeping and you don't know if you were bit, it's better to be safe than sorry. Or if you pet or got bit by any wild mammal, you should probably go get rabies shots post-exposure. All right, how do they produce their sound for echolocation? So this is my area of expertise and the part that I love. And again, don't worry, Rudy, I won't go over too much on the echolocation stuff. But so bats are producing sound with their larynx in the same way that we produce sound. But what's really different about it is that it's at such a high frequency above the range of human hearing. And they're using these sounds that will bounce off something like an insect in this video to be able to hone in on it. And they can get details from the size of an insect to the texture of that insect. It is incredible. So what I study is things like this. This is a recording from a bat detector. And I'm able to look at these pulses of sound that they're making and identify them to species. So this would be a big brown bat versus these here are two species. You can see this lower one at this lower frequency is a hoary bat, and this upper frequency one here are red bats. So yeah, so I can talk about more on echolocation, but Fred, I see your question. Yeah, in Uganda and the bats in Africa are definitely, it's a different situation with bats in Africa. Again, there's very different families of bats that do tend to have the ability to be reservoirs for diseases. There's actually some really, really good videos out there about bats and diseases if anyone's interested in learning more about that. But so number one, bats here, I would not think of them as a vector for disease. Just don't pet them. And then if you are traveling somewhere like into Africa or Asia, again, don't eat bats. Let them stay in their roosts, and you'll be all right. So there is an association between bats and Ebola. So with rabies, bats get rabies. It's not like they stay healthy and then can pass it on. They get sick just like any other mammal getting rabies. What's unique with them having like these coronaviruses and even Ebola, the virus, they don't get affected by it. So really what's neat is that we should be studying why. And that's partially why they're able to live so long, is they have very unique immune systems. So they're able to carry these viruses without them affecting them. So that's part of the issue. And I see a question about Bamberger. Yes, I am familiar with Bamberger Ranch. I actually am doing research there right now, and we're monitoring for white nose syndrome. And it is a really, really special place. This man-made cave. I think the ranch is Sheila Ranch down by San Antonio. Or no, it's in Johnson City near there. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, Amanda, excuse me again. Would you be willing to stay just a few minutes? We need to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And if you would, there may be other questions.
No problem.
Okay, thank you so much. And I apologize for interrupting. I can see
No
what
problem.
Norman and Laura were saying, that they were so fascinated when they heard your presentation earlier. So thank you again for being with us today and for a very informative and interesting program.
Thank you guys for wanting to learn about bats. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, let me move on to the agenda. And for next week, we have, well, let's see, Patty, can you tell us about next week's program, please?
Sure. Next week, we have Dr. Rowena Dashel, and she is going to talk to us about the Neil Conference House Museum, which is one of the very oldest homes in Austin. So we look forward to that.
All right, thank you so much. And Alan, did your guests make it today so that we can acknowledge them?
I don't think any of them did, but I know at least one is going to be interested in watching the video because our grandson is a sophomore student in the biological and ecological program at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And he's going to find this very, very interesting.
Well, thank you. And our greetings to Don and your other guest, Don. Sorry that he wasn't able to make it. And I see our future Dr. Fred is joining us. You wanna add anything more? There are some questions of how we should address you as Dr. Father Fred or Father Dr. Fred. How what is the appropriate address?
Appropriate address is Fred.
Well, we extend our congratulations on your successful defense of your doctoral dissertation. So a wonderful, wonderful success achievement there. Okay, I believe that
Rudy?
yes.
Rudy?
Yes, go ahead.
Could we get just a brief update from Fred? We understood earlier that he would probably be leaving temporarily to go back home sometime this time period or towards the end of this year. Fred, do you have an update on that?
I have my ticket for the 15th of December. And I'll be going to Uganda. I have a teaching position in Nairobi, Kenya. I think maybe teach there. I just need to get my feet wet a little bit. And then I'll be, I think, doing a postdoc of some sort. And likely I'll come to the US. But for now, I need to go back home.
Well, we hope you would find a Lions Club that would suit you there in Kenya then.
Certainly.
All right, great.
We will be out there speaking Swahili.
Dr. Fred, Father Fred.
Yes. Yes, Bob.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And if those that might still have a question, I believe Dr. Amanda has indicated a willingness to still address those questions. So let me go back to my little machine here, my applause meter here, my sound machine, and see if that sounds like applause. But thank you everyone for participating. It was a wonderful meeting and we are now adjourned. We will see you next week. If for those that have questions for Dr. Amanda, if you will raise your hand, please. Yeah, go ahead. Gaylord, I see your hand. Unmute yourself.
Yes, so Dr. Adams, it was just fascinating because bats have always been kind of the mystery mammal in our lives. And two questions. First, I've got a geography nut, and you said, but remind us where Bracken Cave is located geographically.
It is about 20 miles north of San Antonio. Do you know where the Natural Bridge Caverns are?
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
there.
And this is a silly question, but when the person that created Batman and Robin, what is it about bats that would cause him to name the lead character Batman?
Yeah, actually, that's been something that I've always been like a little torn on because, you know, it's nice because people are more aware of bats because of Batman, and he kind of takes it into his persona of being a superhero. And so I feel like that gives bats a good light. But what spurred him to become Batman was because he like fell into a cave or something and all these bats flew up and scared him. And it was more of a overcoming his fears. And so I don't really like that origin of bats are really scary because they wouldn't have harmed him. So anyway, that's how Batman and bats relate.
Well, that's an interesting legend, but the main thing you would tell us, because of our childhood fears of bats, is just don't touch them. That they're typically not going to be like certain birds that love to attack us or attack our hair or whatever, thinking we're messing with their nest. But just leave them alone and they won't bother the human.
Precisely. Yeah, like you said, birds do have some of that protective behavior of their territories and their nests. Bats don't have that. So if a person were to come up to where a bat had its pups, like on a tree or something, they would either fly away with their pups, or they would try and hide, but they would do nothing. They would never come towards a human willingly. But that does bring me during the summer when the pups are born, and also when they start flying, you know, young ones are not always so smart, don't always know what to do. So they can end up on the ground. And so most of the times when I get calls about people finding bats, it's usually juveniles or babies that can't fly yet, or juveniles who landed in the wrong spot for the night. And so actually in Austin is one of the best bat rescues in the world. The Austin Bat Refuge, they have a website. If you ever find a bat, call them. They will come, and they are just wonderful people and have top-notch care. They get them released all the time. So yeah, being in Austin, you guys are very lucky that you have that resource. There's many places that don't, if they ever find a bat on the ground.
And not that I'll remember or be able to use it, but what species of bat is found mostly in Austin and the Congress Avenue Bridge colony?
The Mexican free-tail bat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wrote that down. Very good.
Good.
Thank you. You took what to be a complicated subject into a very fascinating presentation, and thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
We know that bats eat a lot of insects, especially mosquitoes.
Yep.
So you touched a little bit about how they are very useful and for helping us control the mosquitoes, which create a lot of disease. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that's actually a little bit of a controversial topic, to be honest. So previously, when we were doing bat diet studies, the way we would study what they ate was we would collect their guano, which is the scientific name for bat poop, and then put it under a microscope and break it apart and look for pieces of insects. So you might find part of a cricket foot and then have to identify that they ate a cricket. So it wasn't very precise, as you can imagine, identifying pieces of bugs like that. And so if they had eaten a mosquito, there's no way you would have detected with that method that they ate mosquitoes. And now that we have more refined kind of genetic techniques and everything for figuring out their diet, they are starting to find that they do eat mosquitoes, but it's not as many as we would hope. Like they're going to be eating far more moths and beetles and things like that than they are mosquitoes. Because you kind of think of it as eating a steak versus a shrimp. You know, they're just so tiny and not very nutritious that they will eat them if they're there, but that's not going to be their primary diet. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, Norman.
This is Norman. Hey, we haven't talked to any of us, brought anything about that wonderful picture you have with a bat in your arms. And I was wondering, to what extent do you get involved with your patients? And do you actually have some that you are more closely involved with or take care of, or you help them with their pups, or, you know, this is a very close relationship that you have that my wife would not come anywhere close to.
So true. Yeah, I definitely love my bats. I do not have any bats in my house right now, but during the summer, if someone finds an injured bat and things, I've raised baby pups until they can fly and released them. Really the best experience of my life was I went and worked in Australia and helped raise orphaned flying fox pups. So I don't know, any of you spend very much time on social media, if you find there's a lot of pictures of, we call them little bat burritos because they're baby bats that are wrapped up in cloth. So they look like, they're like swaddled. And so I got to raise all these bats. They will get sometimes 300 orphaned flying fox pups a summer. It's really bad. So in general, I don't have any that I am, going to keep long term. But maybe eventually, when I have the resources, if we get non-releasable bats, like those that can survive but had to have like a wing amputated or something, we use those for education and outreach and try and give them, a good retirement. And so I don't have any of those yet.
We were very lucky. I just add this, about 10, 12 years ago, we went to Bali. And in Bali, we had the great fortune of seeing those 6-foot winged bats. And of course, as a tourist, what they do is they let you hold one up, which I did. And I've got pictures of showing that bat to all my friends. And they just couldn't believe it. When's that bat going to eat you or whatever, but it was great. I love being close to animals.
Did you think they were cute?
I thought, yeah, I do. Yeah, see there, I can appreciate beauty.
There you go. Oh, I'm so jealous. I've never seen one in person. I have not been to Bali.
Alan, I believe, has a question, and then Roberto.
Okay. Yeah, in about the 9th grade, I did a research paper on the Army's efforts during World War II to weaponize bats, and that focused mostly in Texas. But the program was basically preempted by the revealing of the atomic bomb, and they could cancel that. But do you ever consider a what if the atomic bomb hadn't come along? Where do you think that program was headed? They had some accidents in the process, but using them to deliver incendiary bombs over Japan. What do you think about that?
I love it that you know about that. It's a pretty crazy program, and from what I heard and what I remember, that it was more a pipe dream than going to be really effective. Bats are extremely smart, but also with that comes a bit of willfulness. They do what they want. Like there's some studies where there's like standard research where you want them to like, you have like a scent here and nothing here, and you want to see which one they choose. Bats kind of don't care. There's some bats that are like right-handed and right-winged, and they like to fly to the right no matter what is going on. They want to fly to the right. And so I can imagine if they're trying to train them to go and fly in a particular place, that those bats are just going to go where they want. So I don't think it would have gone all the way, but it is pretty crazy, a neat idea.
I don't think they were trying to train them really, but the idea was that they would refrigerate them and put them into these egg carton-like bomb casings with little tiny incendiary bombs strapped on them. And then the idea would be as they fell, they would thaw out, but that they would seek to roost up under the eaves of these flimsy buildings in Japan. But unfortunately, they couldn't really control very well where they would end up. And in some of their tests out in New Mexico, they ended up burning down a couple of buildings at an Air Force base out there that were not intended targets. So I get your point.
But I will say that there's a few of us in the world who have successfully trained bats. So I've trained bats to fly across a room and come back to me and crawl into my hand so that they can get a mealworm to eat. So they are trainable with a lot of hard work.
Yeah, Roberto, you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned that they spit out this saliva that has the immune system, help the immune system. And also they have a real high pitch thing that they send out. And also their eyesight can see things. There are studies going on how we can take advantage and learn from that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So actually, the lab that I work in at Texas A&M, we've actually had projects with the Department of Defense that's all I could say actually, is studying their echolocation for naval applications, and improving naval sonar based on learning from bats and what they're doing. So there's definitely active areas of research for improving sonar and radar. And then yes, they're being used for vampire bat saliva for medical uses. I think what else? Yeah, and there's a lot of research into their immune systems and also their longevity. So, and they're probably go hand in hand. So they have such a good immune system, probably relates to why they're able to live so long, because they really break all the rules. Normally the rule is the smaller you are, the shorter you live. So like an elephant lives a very long time and a mouse lives a short time, where bats are living about the same length amount of time as an elephant, even though they're tiny. So that's why bats are fun, is because they're always breaking the rules. But yeah, we are definitely all over the world, lots of research to benefit us is coming from bats. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Amanda, one more question, if I may. Without the benefit of a control tower and and all those bats are taken off about the same time, how do they know which part of the bridge is first and which part of the bridge is second for takeoff?
I don't think we know.
Without bumping into each other, I mean.
Yeah, no, we don't really know, actually. Yeah, who gets to go first is definitely a question. Do they choose where they go, or is it just the last one back has to go to the front and they have to get out first? We actually still have a lot of questions about that. So I don't know. But they actually, so for a long time, we thought that they didn't run into each other at all. But now with high-speed cameras, we find that they actually do run into each other in those really dense groups more than we realized. So it's pretty funny to watch.
All right, I believe we have everyone satisfied, all their questions answered. So again, Dr. Adams, thank you very, very much. A most fascinating and interesting program.
It was so nice. And actually now I have to go look into my Lions Club in College Station. So.
All right.
Giga Maggies.
Yeah.
There you go, gig 'em. Well, have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much. Thanks, Norman.
Likewise.
I graduated in
Likewise.
1960.
And Mark is our host today. I'm not sure he's still on to click us off. But anyway, everybody be safe, enjoy the rest of the day, and hope to see you on Zoom this time next week.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye then.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it, Armando.
Thank you, Norman.
Thank you.